we're in the post-Hanukkah mode, but there is something that's worth noticing. If you look with regards to the Hanukkah story, it's actually something that drives a lot of rabbis a little crazy, is that the classical sources, you don't really have much to draw upon with regards to, I guess, Inyane, Hanukkah, matters of the holiday. There's nothing about it in Tanakh. There could have been. Sefer Maccabim, that Sefer Hashmonaim, I forget what they call it in Hebrew, but it wasn't canonized. It wasn't put into Tanakh. We don't even have the original Hebrew anymore. The Hanukkah story doesn't really get told over in a I guess any kind of elaborate format in the Gemara. And there's a short piece within Masechah Shabbos that talks about the halachos of the menorah. There isn't too much emphasis on it. Like you have Purim, you have an entire Masechta, an entire tractate of Gemara devoted to it. You have you have Maseches Megillah. But with regards to Hanukkah, there's no such thing. There's actually
a rejection of it because the Sefer existed.
Right. So you read the fact that we had some materials and it wasn't canonized, and that there was no Masechta devoted to it. While Hanukkah is certainly acknowledged, and if you look in other Mishnayos in the times of the Mishnah, there is some mention of Hanukkah. There isn't too much. In the Yerushalmi, there's some mention. I don't think anything at length, really. Not much more than what we have in the Bavli. And if we noticed 2 weeks ago when we talked about the RAMBAN on Hanukkah, the Hanukkah story that is recounted is pretty much focuses on the miracle of the oil, not too much on the miracle of the war.
So remember that the Bavli took place, at least the story of Purim took place where the Bavli was. This was studied and originated. This took place hundreds, 600 years later.
Right, so the Talmud Yerushalmi, like you mentioned, also is a little.
One would think the Yerushalmi might have it, but otherwise there may not have been internet to advise them of the actual details of the story.
By the way, the Purim story, although it gets a lot more space in print, the actual war of Purim is absolutely minimized.
I remember you told me about the
tiny portion. But it is, if you think about it, the whole thing is about the intrigue, and the climax, which is the war, is very brief.
Right. That's something I hope to look into for Purim this year to get more about what you were telling me. But okay, so just to start off, in one explanation as to why there's somewhat of a dearth of material in discussing Hanukkah in our classical literature. There's a very controversial statement of the Chasam Sofer, attributed to the Chasam Sofer. Some say it's so controversial that he couldn't have possibly said it. But it was called over in the name of his grandson. Just started the first source. So the grandson of the Chasam Sofer, Shlomo Sofer, he wrote a book called Chut Meshulash. It details the stories about the three Torah greats, Rabbi Yeshiva Eger, the Chasam Sofer, and the Ksav Sofer, the Chasam Sofer's son. One of the things he quotes in the name of his grandfather, the Chasam Sofer, it says, Margala Bapume, there was a favorite remark of the Chasam Sofer, Ki Nes Hanukkah lo nizkar klal b'Mishnah. The miracle of Hanukkah is not mentioned at all in the Mishnah. It's a little bit more complicated than that. Hanukkah is mentioned in passing, at least in certain Mishnayos, but it's never addressed directly, that's for sure. But Amar Ta'amo, the Chasam Sofer said the reason for this is, Ki Rabbeinu HaKadosh, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, who compiled the Mishnah, Masadeh HaMishnah, Haya Mizera David HaMelech. He was of the Davidic line. V'neis Hanukkah na'asa al-yedei Hashmonaim, but the miracle of Hanukkah, that was done through the Hashmonaim, the Maccabees, Shetafsu HaMeluka. They usurped the kingship. Lo haya mizera David, but they weren't from the Davidic line. V'zeh hara l'Rabbeinu HaKadosh. This was bad in the eyes of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. He wasn't so happy about this. V'akein nishmat hameis michibura, and because of that, he left it out from his writing of the Mishnah. It's a very interesting comment. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, there are actually different texts. There's a second edition of Chut Meshulash where it's said in a more, what's the word, more diplomatic kind of way, not as controversial, but the same message is there, essentially. It kind of entertains the notion, you could read it this way, others choose otherwise, that it seems like there's almost some bias that Yehuda Hanasi did when he compiled the Mishnah, that there's no mention of Hanukkah, perhaps because of some tribal conflict. So, like we mentioned, many put somewhat of a positive spin on this. He wasn't, zealous for his own sake. It wasn't like personal negios, biases, but more out of motivation for something else. What that something else is, we're going to learn about. But it's also important to note there's a lot of other explanations as to why Hanukkah is not mentioned too much in Torah Sheba'al Peh, and certainly not in Torah Shebechsav. But that's just an interesting springboard. Is that why exactly would the Chasam Sofer say such a thing? What could possibly motivate him? If Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi was even in some ways motivated in this way to exclude the Hanukkah story from the Mishnah, from that work, that important work of Torah Shabbat Peh, so where does that come from? Where's the motivation there that we could in some ways put a positive spin on it?
The explanation really doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
In a sense, I guess you're going to explain why it doesn't, but the fact that we're unhappy with something in our history
mm-hmm.
has never led us to delete it. There are all
mm-hmm.
kinds of terrible things in our history that not only do we not delete, we actually feature because it's a lesson learned.
But I think
in here,
this is a story that we have a holiday for it. We celebrate it.
Yeah, I grant that we celebrated, and the victory of the Hashmonaim over the Greeks was a great thing.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that the Hashmonaim came to a bad end
mm-hmm.
is an important lesson to learn. That they were not slated to be the kings.
Mm-hmm.
Levi is not slated to be kings, and it's a lesson that we do learn from the story because it's told over. Whenever you learn the Hanukkah story, you always hear that. Well,
I feel like people do gloss that detail over, so we're going to get to that.
Okay.
But it's something important to know about this is the aftermath of the Hanukkah story. That it wasn't necessarily happily ever after, and we have to see why. In contrast, though, it is important to realize that there is another, path that certainly celebrates what Chashmonan did. Obviously, beyond the celebration of the miracle of the oil, but actually to celebrate the military victory. We talked about it in Al Hanisim, and it's a big deal. To quote the Rambam.
But it's a snapshot in history.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
In a sense.
So the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, he gives a little bit of a replay. He describes what happened in the entire Hanukkah story. Let's not do it inside. It's one giant run-on sentence, very awkward to translate. But essentially what you have is something that the Rambam mentions in particular. The things that are celebrated is V'hamidu melech min hakohanim, that we established a king from the Kohanim. He's talking about things that we're celebrating here. V'chazar malchus Yisrael Yisrael masayim shana. Then you had the Jewish sovereignty. It returned for 200 years ad chorban hasheni, until the destruction of the Second Temple. So there is something to celebrate here from the Hashmonaim, being involved here. The Rambam mentions them specifically, and in Al Hanisim we mention them specifically. So the reason why we would do so, why would we mentioned 2 weeks ago when we talked about Hanukkah, we kind of focused on the rededication aspect of the holiday, and that's kind of what Chazal maybe pointed the holiday more in the direction of, that there was a celebration of the fact that we had religious freedom again, and that we were able to reuse the Mikdash in the way that we wanted to. But the Rambam mentions it's also, of course, important to know that we won a tremendous war. We defeated people, and that we had Jewish sovereignty again. This is supported further. Rav Hutner, he talks about this. I've heard that the Rav says something similar also. If you look in the Gemara Megillah, it talks about why don't we say Hallel on Purim? Right? So one of the reasons that they mention a number of reasons, but one of them is that at the end of the Megillah story, we're still slaves of Achashverosh. We don't have Jewish sovereignty at the end of that story, so apparently it wasn't worthy of a full, celebration, at least with regards to Tahal. But from that, Rav Hutner points out, so the inverse is true also. When you have Jewish sovereignty, and that's what happens at the end of the Hanukkah story, that is something worthy of celebration. That is something worthy of Hallel, which we certainly say all 8 days of the holiday. Full Hallel, in fact. So, at the same time, it's important to mention, like we said earlier, there is a lack of material in the Torah Shabbat Peh and Torah Shabbat Tzav that talks about the Chashmonan specifically and the war, the Milchama and the aftermath of the Hanukkah story. So it's, again, we have to kind of get to where the Chasam Sofer is coming from, and where perhaps something went wrong, where maybe we shouldn't be totally gung-ho about how this Hanukkah story ended. And with that, so that comes into this week's parsha. Comes into the Ramban's comments, which are rather lengthy but very important, and I think somewhat well known. So we have in this week's parsha, you have Yaakov Avinu on his deathbed giving his last words to his children. Right? It's a lot of it is very complicated to understand, because it's part Musar, it's part Nevuah, it's part poetry, it's all mixed together, and it's not so clear. We need the Mefarshim in a major way to help us explain what's going on in these psukim. But what you have is when Yaakov gets up to Yehuda, the fourth son, before that he criticizes Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And now finally praise starts coming towards Yehuda. He praises Yehuda, and then he makes one remark also, and that's the next source. It's Pasuk so it's within that grouping of Psukim where Yaakov is talking about Yehuda. It says, Lo Yasur Shevet mi Yehuda, u'mechokek mi bein raglov. That the scepter shall not depart from Yehuda. That's a phrase that we know from the Purim story. The scepter has a certain significance to Malchus, to kingship. Right? That's the mark of a king. It's what I guess he uses to pronounce his power. So that will not depart from Yehuda. U'mechokek mi bein raglov. There won't depart a lawgiver from between his feet. All of these terms, by the way, are ones that the Mefarshim tackle. So the translation I'm giving you is not necessarily one that everybody will agree with. Anki yavo shilo v'lo yikasanim, and that's a very complicated term. What's being discussed here? This will occur until Shiloh arrives, whatever Shiloh is, and his will be an assemblage of nations. Which actually, that translation is not what the Ramban actually himself says. We're not going to cover that, but whatever all this means, the Ramban's going to get into. If you look at other Mefarshim, they have different takes on it. But we'll start with the Ramban. Keep in mind that on the basic level, we're going to discuss what this means, but also, I guess, big picture perspective, try to think about what is being said here, as the Ramban describes it. Is this a prophecy? Is this something else? Is this something more than that? Or is it a little bit of everything? So let's start with the Ramban. So he says, Lo Yasser Shevet mi Yehuda, right? The scepter shall not depart from Yehuda. Ein inyano shelo Yasser l'olam. This is not to say that this the scepter of Judah, the kingship of Yehuda, will never be removed at all. That it will be there for eternity. Because you have in the Torah itself, a pasuk in the Devarim, you have Moshe Rabbeinu talking about what's going to happen in the future. Yolech Hashem oscha malkacha asher takim alecha. God's going to lead you and the king that you've appointed, alecha, el goy asher lo yadata ata v'avosecha, to a nation that neither you or your fathers know. V'hinei hemu malkom bagola. End quote. That's the end quote of the pasuk. What are we referring to? We're referring to Galus. We're referring to the Jewish people being punished, and there's going to be an end of Jewish sovereignty. Ramban points out this is the Jewish people and their king going into exile. There will be times in history, Moshe Rabbeinu tells you even before it happens, we're not just playing Monday morning quarterback here, this is Moshe Rabbeinu telling you before it happens that there's going to be a time of Galus where there's not going to be a kingship. And the Ramban points out, obviously, we have at this point in time in history, the Ramban says, well, right now we don't have a king in Israel. There's what to talk about maybe in the past couple of years, since we've had Medinas Yisrael, that things are starting to come towards some concept of Maluka or sovereignty, certainly some sense of sovereignty we have. But at least for sure in the Ramban's time there was nothing of that sort happening. So the Ramban says, you clearly can't understand this pasuk to be referring to a promise that there's going to be kingship and Jewish sovereignty forever, right? In that sense, we do have to kind of use history and realize that obviously what's being said doesn't apply in that sense. Yeah? It's important to realize, by the way, why is the Ramban talking about this? And this is what made me think about the disputation a little bit. Missed it before. I was talking about how eventually, if we come to a slower week with regards to Parsha, the Ramban might not have something big to say. I think we might take a little bit of a break and talk about the disputation between the Ramban and Pablo Cristiani. They actually made a movie out of it that we might take a look at. But anyways, one of the topics apparently, I owe credit to ArtScroll in their notes. They made this reference here. They pointed out that Ramban is talking about this for a very important reason, at least with regards to the aspect of this that he's going to address right now, is that apparently Christians had made use of this pasuk in some way to try to argue their point. That they thought that this pasuk indicates some type of everlasting kingship of Yehuda that will never be interrupted. And apparently, Jesus came from Shevet Yehuda. As we know, he came from Klal Yisrael. And their understanding is, if you have a Gullus, if you don't have a king in Israel, I'm not so clear on exactly how exactly they understand it, but they understand in some way, if you don't have what the Jews think is Jewish sovereignty, and yet this verse says that there's going to be continuous Jewish sovereignty, it must be that there's somebody else out there that is the leader, that's in some ways alive, in some ways manifesting his leadership throughout the world. And they understood that to be a reference to Jesus. So we obviously don't view things that way, and the Ramban points this out himself.
By their own theology, it's not possible.
How so?
Their own theology, he's not descended from David.
So not from David?
By their own theology, he's not.
So I mean, I think he came from Yehuda. I think they say he came from Yehuda.
Who came from Yehuda? Joseph.
Joseph. I'm not holding in Christianity.
Mary's husband,
Christian doctrine.
Joseph,
Uh-huh.
they trace back to Yehuda.
Okay.
He's not related to Joseph by their own theology.
They say he's not the son of Joseph. So, and Joseph is the one.
I'm a little unclear on
Well,
this.
they
His
said-
mother came from...
His mother, I don't know where she came from, but his father,
Uh-huh.
of course, they say is God,
Right.
not
Okay.
Joseph.
Uh-huh.
And when the Pope was asked by Leib Kellerman
Uh-huh.
this question, the Pope's spokesman said, well, we know that he wasn't from Yehuda.
Uh-huh.
It's outright.
Oh, okay, so they say that.
That he was from an undistinguished tribe, an undistinguished city.
So in the time of Kellerman already, in our times.
Our time.
That's
the
been
Pope John,
acknowledged.
well,
Apparently,
the last Pope or the Pope before?
apparently in the time of the disputation, in RAMBAN himself
it actually
wrote
doesn't
an
make
account
sense.
of what happened in the Sefer
Yeah.
Mikuach.
And the vast majority of Jews are from Shevet Yehuda at that point in the world's history.
True.
Because the
We're most likely from
Yisrael
Shevet Yehuda as well.
Yes. Galad Yisrael, if you're not a Kohen Levi, you wouldn't be odds that we're all from Shevet
Okay.
Yehuda.
Or Benjamin.
In any event, there was at that time at least. I haven't looked into sufficiently, and that's why I'm really interested in looking at the actual vikuach, the disputation itself, to see what exactly the argument was. But RAMBAN is coming to address that. You clearly can't read these psukim to be referring to some type of everlasting, without any interruption, kingship of the Jewish people. Even if you could manage to somehow pull the stretch that somehow is a reference to their God, because Moshe Rabbeinu himself in the Torah, before there's a galus, before they're even in Israel for the first time, Moshe Rabbeinu says that there's going to be galus, there's going to be a lack of kingship, there's going to be chaos. So this isn't the Ramban just looking back in history and making the pieces fit. He's saying Moshe himself acknowledged these things before, so it's you can't really take things in that direction. But he continues. The Navi Moshe Rabbeinu, he was not. Are we referring to Moshe? Sorry. No, we're referring to Yaakov, I believe. Yeah, Yaakov. When he was, this is being viewed as some type of a nevuah by the Ramban. This is not a promise that the Jewish people will never be in captivity, never have galus, and they'll always be ruled by Yehuda. Rather, what's being said here by Yaakov is that the kingship will never depart from Shevet Yehuda. It will never and go to one of the other Shvatim, one of the other brothers instead. Kingship and rulership will completely come from him. His brothers, the other Shvatim, nobody's going to come from them that's going to rule over him, over Yehuda. And similarly, there won't be a lawgiver that comes from outside of his loins. Everybody that has the signet ring, another symbol that we're familiar with from the Purim story, the symbol of being able to pass laws, that too will only come from Yehuda. He's the one that will command all the Jewish people. He'll have the seal of kingship. Quoting the rest of the pasuk that Yaakov is saying here, until, and the way Rabbi Shavel translates this in his English is, until his Shiloh means his son, until his son comes, and then there will be a gathering of all the nations. That he'll be able to has his will, whatever he wants. V'zehu HaMashiach. Who is this son that we're referring to? Until Mashiach comes. That in total, the pasuk is saying that there won't be any loss of kingship from Yehuda in his rulership over Yisrael until Shiloh comes. And the Ramban goes on to say, Ki shevet yirmos l'David shu hamelech harishon asher lo shevet hamachos v'shiloh hu beno asher liyikas ha'amin. That this isn't to say that when Mashiach comes that there will no longer be any Davidic line, any line from Yehuda being king, but the opposite, that Yehuda will rule over all of Klal Yisrael until Mashiach, and then his son will rule over even more than that, over the entire world, to whatever extent that means. I don't think we typically assume that to mean world domination. I don't think that's the goal of the Jewish people, but it is in some way, I guess, an acknowledgement that Klal Yisrael is here to stay, and that we'll have not only a sovereignty, but a certain level of safety.
How does he get these meanings for Shiloh?
Sorry?
How does he derive these meanings for Shiloh?
Yeah.
So Rabbi Shavel in his notes and the Ramban himself doesn't really elaborate on it, so I think Rabbi Shavel has to kind of do that in his translation. Shil can refer to son in some way. Shilya in Aramaic, or in Hebrew itself, I think actually can mean a placenta. It can in some ways connote the term of offspring. So Shiloh, his offspring, until his offspring at that time.
Is it spelled the same way that the town of Shiloh is spelled?
So actually, if you note in the pasuk, there's a kriyuk siv difference there with regards to the word Shiloh. We pronounce it as if there's a vav with a cholam over it, but it ends with a hey, as in I think that's the way we call the city. I think we spell the city with a hey.
Right.
But that's the way it's written in the Torah itself. So I'm not sure what the significance is there, but it's important to know that we have variants in the Torah itself there. Okay, so first of all, we mentioned how the Ramban is first addressing this, which it would seem like a pretty simple idea. I think if any of us are reading the Chumash, we know that for sure that doesn't mean that there's going to be a non-stop kingdom of Yehuda, because we've lived through history and we know that that's not the case. So he was mentioning that to refute Christianity, but the remainder of what we're going to do is there's going to be problems with this theory. Now, in some ways we have the privilege of history, looking back and trying to make a pattern and understand what this means, assuming it's a nevuah, by seeing how it played out in the past. We have the opportunity to play Monday morning quarterback. But at the same time, it's actually going to cause problems too, because we're going to realize the Ramban's formulation is not perfect. There are instances in Jewish history where you could think of that this formulation that he made is not going to work out perfectly.
How does Ramban translate ad from the word ad kiyo Shiloh?
I think until his son. That's how you would understand that term.
Then it makes no sense whatsoever. We say lo yasur. The question is just, how do you explain lo yasur shevet mida? Where's the emphasis? Is it lo yasur shevet? So we say it can't be, because Moshe has already told us the shevet will disappear. We will lose sovereignty. Mm-hmm. Therefore, it means lo yasur shevet Yehuda. Yehuda will always retain sovereignty. If Yehuda always retains sovereignty, then what do we have to worry about his son for? It'll always be there anyways. So to say ad kiyo Shiloh cannot be translated as meaning until.
No, so the way he explained it was until his son comes, at which point the situation will improve even more. That there's going to be a kingship over the entire world in some way. No?
Well, then it's the ad has a different meaning then.
Ad just in the sense of until a certain period in time where something will change.
Yes, okay. The ad doesn't mean until. And it's an extension, it's not until, because the presumption is lo yasur shevet miyudah means that sovereignty will remain only within Israel, over Israel. And
right, that's why you have to do a little bit of acrobatics here.
It doesn't.
When you use ad, it almost sounds like that will stop entirely at that point in time. But he says it's not that it'll stop, but that it'll change drastically for the better. That's how we understand it.
Yeah, if you change it to at which time.
It doesn't follow the words.
How did I translate it here? Until, right?
Until.
Okay. That was kind of a mishmash of, I tried to find, I think, the most mainstream translation. It's a cross between Art Scroll and the way Rabbi Chevelle himself translates it here. But, okay. So the Ramban is going to address difficulties within this approach. You have issues in Jewish history where it seems to not correspond to the way he's discussing things. Right? The Ramban is saying, once the Malucha gets going with David, or with Yehuda, let's be more accurate, that's how Yaakov Avinu says it, once it gets started with Yehuda, it'll never leave, it'll never go to the other Shvatim. Right? Now, the very first problem in Jewish history, anybody guess what that is? Who's the first king that we have? Shaul. The very first king that we have is not a king from the Davidic line. He was born before David, in fact. He's from Shevet Binyamin. So what do we do about Shaul? How do we understand that in light of the Ramban's formulation of what Yaakov means? So he continues. With regards to Shaul, that since the Jewish people's request at that time, and this is a very complicated topic in its own right, that they wanted kingship, it was repulsive to God. It was an abomination. God didn't want to get things started with regards to the Jewish people's kingship from somebody from the Davidic line, from the line that would continue onward. That wouldn't sit well. The Torah's attitude towards kingship is very complicated. We have in Sefer Devarim, there's discussion of when you say that I'd like a king upon me, so then you have such and such laws, etc. Parameters to have a king. It seems like the Torah is telling you that you should have a king. And the Ramban himself, and as well as the Rambam and others, do assume that to be a command. You should have a king. It's a mitzvah to eventually appoint a king. Well, at the same time, if you look at this story in Sefer Shmuel, if you look at the discussion of Jewish people requesting a king, Shmuel, as well as God's reaction, is very negative. They're not happy about it.
But it's not because they request a king.
Right, so
they
what would you
request
say?
a king like other nations.
Like the other nations, right? So
And
that's probably the most sensible way to put all these ideas together, is that there's a mitzvah to have a king. At the same time, it has to come from the right place, and if you do it in the wrong way, in some ways you're being yotzei mitzvah, but in other ways it depends on what you do.
I mean, if they had said to Shmuel, we want to have a king as Yaakov Avinu had told us we should. It might have been a very different reaction than when he had with we want a king like Moab was.
As Moshe told us that it's a mitzvah, we want to have a king, we think that's the way the government needs to be built up, so let's do that. Then you may have had a more positive reaction. There was kind of a national peer pressure going on, and said they wanted to be like everyone else. And there's more to that story also, exactly why they wanted a king at that time as opposed to beforehand. There's some levels of corruption in Shmuel's own children. It's a long story there, but the basic idea is that Malchus, kingship, is something that we want, but at the same time, God responded negatively in that particular instance because it came from a bad place. And because of that, so the Ramban is explaining, why didn't you start from somebody from Yehuda, from Shevet Yehuda, from it's hard to say the Davidic line because David wasn't in the picture yet, but why not from Shevet Yehuda? Because God said he didn't want to get things started off on the wrong foot with Malchus David. He wanted to break in the Jewish people, so to speak, with somebody else. So from Shaul, who's from Shevet Binyamin. And this is hinted to, this idea that God wasn't happy about things. It's more explicit in Shmuel also, but Hosea says, paraphrasing God, I'm going to give you a king in anger, and I'm going to take him away as well. This is talking about Shaul's demise in my wrath. God gave it to them, but not really so willfully, so to speak. Therefore he also took it away in anger. Because Shaul and his children, they died, and because of that, the line of kingship coming from Shaul ended, and instead you had Malchus David. This is all because Shmuel was doing a great job. He was the judge, he was fighting their wars, he was saving the Jewish people. There was no need at that time for a king yet. That Shmuel himself says, who's your king? God's your king. God himself even said to Shmuel, almost like a pick-me-up. Shmuel was getting a little depressed that they didn't want him as a leader anymore. God says, they're not rejecting you. They're rejecting me.
That's a comfort to a prophet.
Yeah, don't worry. It's not you, Shmuel. It's me. And therefore, God didn't give Klal Yisrael an everlasting Malchus there through Malchus Yehuda. Instead, He gave them a temporary one through Shaul. You have a bigger problem though. The Ramban's going to address right now is that. What we have here is after we know how Shaul stumbles in the end. It's Haftorah we read. I can't recall when exactly. Before Purim? Yeah. There's a Haftorah about Shaul, his mistake with regards to the war of Amalek, not killing everyone.
Yeah.
And they're very upset at him. And at that point, so Shmuel says, Masha Amar Akasav, you have a pasuk there, Nischalta lo shamarta es mitzvos Hashem, you stumbled, you didn't follow the law of God, the command of God to destroy Elokecha, your God, to kill all of the Amalekim asher tzivacha, that I commanded you, ki ata heikin Hashem es mamlaktecha, and now Hashem, He had prepared that your kingship, El Yisrael ad olam, your kingship towards Israel, should last forever. And then, etc., and Shmuel goes on to say, but because he messed up, now it's not going to be so anymore. But the problem with that is obvious, right? What did Shmuel just say there in that passage?
He denies the one that it would never leave Yehuda.
Right. He makes it sound like had Shaul did the right thing, had Shaul done the right thing, you would have had an everlasting dynasty coming from Shaul, right? Which seems to very much fly in the face of what the Ramban is saying. Had Shaul
It was assumed that Jonathan was going to succeed. it was assumed that Yonasan was the crown prince.
Mm-hmm. There was no talk about a shift in Shvatim yet or anything like that. And it seems like Shaul was punished at the time by getting the Malchus stripped from him and his family, but in potential it sounds like it could have happened. And so what do we do with that? If the Ramban says that Yaakov, well before this, is saying that there's going to be a Malchus going from Yehuda, and that's what's going to be the dynasty, that's what's going to go on forever, so what do we do with this? So the Ramban says, Lo al kulam. This would have been a kingship that would not have been on everyone. V'zet ham el Yisrael. That's why there's a mention in the pasuk. It says that there will be you could have had a kingship, an everlasting kingship to Israel as opposed to over al Yisrael, which would have implied perhaps a kingship over everyone. So that's one way one answer the Ramban gives to try to solve this problem. That Shaul would have had a limited kingship over Klal Yisrael, perhaps parts of it. He goes on to explain. Perhaps he would have been king over just the Shvatim from his own mother, meaning from Rachel Imenu, the Shvatim that came from Rachel. Al Binyamin v'Ephraim u'Menashe. Ki Yehuda v'Ephraim kishnei amim nechshavim b'Yisrael. You have this concept that Ephraim and Yehuda are almost they're two separate kingdoms in Israel. Practically speaking, that happened. We had an unfortunate split. If you look in Naf, we had the 10 lost tribes, that we call them now. They had split from Yehuda and Binyamin. So there was an Ephraim kingdom and a Yehuda kingdom. So the Ramban suggests perhaps you could have had a similar split, that Shaul would have been the king over the Ephraim, Menashe, Binyamin segment, and you would have had David continuing to be king over the rest. So that's one possibility. Or maybe he would have been, so to speak, a king under a king. That somebody from the Yehuda line would have been the real king, which we'd say would eventually be David and his ancestors. But Shaul would have been a king in some respect, but underneath him in power. And both of these are a little bit difficult to deal with. And both of them have their limits. In some ways, in the first answer, the Ramban seems to indicate like there is the split between Ephraim and Yehuda is somewhat of a lechatchila, as if like it was meant to be that way. We certainly don't view that way historically. We don't view that split as a good thing. We wanted all of Israel to be together under one kingship. And the second answer is difficult because I think a king, by definition, we assume to mean absolute power. Take no orders from anyone else, kind of person. And to say that he'd be a king under the rulership of another king, that's hard to imagine really fitting the description of the job. But that's what the Ramban does with this, at least with regards to that particular promise that Shmuel makes. Practically speaking, this issue didn't come up at this point, right? Because like we said, Shaul had stumbled in a way in which he lost that privilege, and we'll see in the future also. You have other monarchies that don't come from David, where practically speaking, there was no interference. They didn't continue to go on forever. Where there might have been. Actually, I don't think we're going to talk about this explicitly in the Ramban, but Yeravam, the first king of the other 10 tribes, right, over Malchus Yisrael. So he happened to have been a very wicked person. But Achia Hashiloni, so we are going to discuss this a little bit. Achia Hashiloni seems to indicate similarly that you're going to rule forever in some way if you do a good job here. He didn't. But again, it invokes that idea. There's a machlokas between the Rambam and the Ravid concerning what that means also for the same reason. How do you understand saying that the Davidic line is going to go on forever, while at the same time say that some other line could also continue on forever? Okay, let's go a little further. Right, so we took care of Shaul. Shaul, at least from a practical perspective, what we're saying is that came before David. This promise that Yaakov gives, that's after David starts, after Malchus Yehuda begins, then it won't be removed. But before things even get started, so anything goes. And anything did go. You had Shaul from Shevet Binyamin beforehand. But again, so we mentioned we have kings after that. Most notably, and eventually we have to get to the Hanukkah story here, the Chashmonaim. Chashmonaim were Kohanim. They were not part of Shevet Yehuda, they were part of Shevet Levi. So we're going to go on to that right now. Hamolkim al Yisrael Mishar Shvatim Achrei David. You have kings from other tribes after David HaMelech over Maldas Avim Umavirim Nachala. It appears to me, the Ramban says, that these people they made a mistake. They committed a sin by diverting the birthright, so to speak. They relied on, and this is what makes things more difficult, the person that anointed, or at least that crowned king Yeravam, was a Navi. It was Achia Hashiloni. He was somebody that we viewed as having legitimate nevuah. and he thought that this was the right thing to do. So va'amar va'aneh Ezra David laman zos achlo kol hayamim. Achia, when he actually made this promise, when he talked about what's going to happen to Yerovam as he was making him king, he pointed out that what's going on here is because God is upset at David, temporarily though, not for all of the days. Eventually the Davidic line is going to come back. So in some ways that solves the problem. Achia Hashiloni himself says to Yerovam when he crowns him king, listen, this is going to be a temporary job. V'kasher harichu Yisrael lehimloch aleim. When the kings of Israel continued to go from next monarch to next monarch, that was where things went wrong, right? They didn't eventually return the kingship to the Davidic line. That's where they did something bad. They violated the words of Yaakov, and they were punished. It's like the pasuk in Hosea that we mentioned earlier. So here we have a little bit of a perspective shift here. Anybody notice what happened here? The Ramban said, what about all the other kings afterwards, after David, the Davidic line started? What's going on there? They did something wrong, and they shouldn't have done it. So originally we were viewing this entire thing as a nevuah, right? This is Yaakov Avinu telling his children what will happen. Now all of a sudden the Ramban took a very different perspective as to what Yaakov is saying. Took it as a tzivui. This is a mitzvah. Right, that this is something that has to happen, not just something that will happen. And because of that, the Ramban is starting to criticize the kings, at least after Yerovam. Yerovam wasn't a good king at all, but after that, you should have, for sure at that point, given the kingship back over to the Davidic line. And apparently that was a violation of a mitzvah. So what you have here is the Ramban is entertaining the notion that there is the ability to have some dispensation for, a hora shah, that you can have a temporary ruler for some period of time. If he's the right man for the job, that doesn't come from Malchus Beis David. That's okay. But as soon as that moment ends, the Ramban is saying, and that's what Achia Hashiloni was saying as well, you have to give it back. And that's not what happened. With that, we can maybe have some idea of what Chashmonaim did, right? That there was at least a start, right? There was clearly a need for them at that time historically. There was no one else that was stepping up to do the job, and they did. But nevertheless, the Ramban is going to take a harsher look towards the Hashmonaim, which we'll look at right now. This is where things get very controversial here. So, this is why the Maccabees, the Hashmonaim, got punished in the days of the Second Temple. They were, and the Ramban gives credit where credit is due, they were tremendous, pious people. Had they not stepped up at this point, the entire Torah and mitzvahs, it would have been forgotten from Klal Yisrael. There wouldn't be a Jewish people anymore. Antiochus would have Hellenized all of us. But nevertheless, we shouldn't look at things so simply. Nenshu onesh gadol, they got a tremendous punishment because of the aftermath of the Hanukkah story. You had the four, why the Ramban thinks there are four sons, I'm not sure. I think we typically understand there to be 5 sons of Matisyahu. But the 4 sons of, maybe he's referring to the ones that were kings. The 4 sons of Matisyahu, the Hashmonai kings, they were tremendous, great people. But when they ruled one after the other, despite the fact that they were in many ways tremendously successful in expanding Israel's borders and really, I think, having a spiritual revival within the Jewish people, they nevertheless, they all fell by the sword. They all were killed in some way. I'm not so familiar with the history, but they all died in battles trying to defend the Jewish state in some way. And the punishment, it got so severe in the end that we have the statement of the Chachamim in Bava Basra. Bava Basra discusses the laws that in many ways have to do with yichus, in regards to where a person comes from in his family line, the relevance of those things. So it says there, anybody that says, I'm a Hashmonian, I come from that family, Avdahu, he's a slave. He's not really from the Hashmonai family. We're not criticizing the Hashmonai family in that statement. We're saying he must be a liar. He's not really from that family. Because they all, and this is the Ramban talking, they were all cut down because of this sin. The Gemara goes on to tell a story. How do we know that there's not a single member of the Hashmonai family left? They apparently all lived in one palatial building. Herod, Hordus. In the Gemara, he was a slave of the Chashmonaim. The Gemara recounts a story where he didn't enjoy his job there. He had a nevuah that not a nevuah. Somehow he got a message in a dream. I don't know what it was. That said, anybody that rebels against their masters, the Chashmonaim, on this day, they'll be successful. And at that point, there's one more thing. Before that element of the story, Hordus Herod had a crush on one of the girls that lived in the home, one of the Chashmonaim girls. So he really liked her. And after he gets this baskol, or whatever you want to call it, this message that he got in his head, which apparently was true, he basically massacred the entire Chashmonaim family in the palace that day. He killed every single one except for this girl. I don't recall if the Gemara says her name, but in any event, she was not so keen to the idea of marrying the guy that murdered her entire family. For whatever reason, she runs up to the roof of the house, and she screams out and she says, anybody that claims they're part of the Chashmonaim house, she's basically quoting, or the Gemara is a quote of her, said anybody that claims to be part of the Chashmonaim, she felt that Herod Hordus would try to take the mantle of the Chashmonaim family. Anybody that claims they're from the Chashmonaim is a liar, he's a slave. And then she jumped off the roof and killed herself before Hordus would actually get there. But the story is very dramatic, and something that definitely comes out of the story is there wasn't a single Chashmonaim left. That the entire family had a very bitter and unfortunate end because of, RAMBAN says, because of what happened, that they usurped the Melucha from Yehuda, which sounds very harsh. And we'll maybe describe why that was so harsh. Let's just finish this paragraph. Right? You could claim that maybe Shimon, he's one of the later ancestors of the Chashmonaim family. He got punished for something else. He became a Sadducee. All the generations that came before him from the family that ran Klal Yisrael, they were righteous people. They didn't do those mistakes, and yet still, they were all murdered in some way. And the RAMBAN says it's because of this avera that they took away the melucha from the Davidic line. And therefore their shevet, their scepter, their lawgivers were uprooted entirely. Their punishment was mida keneged mida shehim shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu aleim es avdeim v'him hechritun. That God put an eved, their own slave, over them and stripped the melucha from them because they stripped the melucha away from Shevet Yehuda. So again, the RAMBAN is not denying the fact that the Chashmonaim are tzaddikim. He's not saying don't celebrate Hanukkah. He celebrated Hanukkah. He wrote all about it in Masechah Shabbos. He's saying that we shouldn't simplify things. We shouldn't ignore the aftermath of the story where apparently, and we mentioned earlier, the RAMBAN says that you can have a Horah Shah, you can have a temporary dispensation, have a non-Davidic king for practical purposes, but the moment that need goes away, it should go back to the Davidic line. And they made a mistake in that way. They're certainly good guys overall, but this was a mistake. At the same time, you have to wonder, though, why was this such a harsh punishment? Right? We talked earlier about other kingships that were not through the Davidic line, and I don't think we know of any severe punishment as this.
This was, in this case, it wasn't just usurping it; it was combining the holiness of Levi.
You're looking ahead, aren't you?
No.
Good. So the RAMBAN is going to get into why were the Kohanim worthy of such a severe punishment here. It cut them a little slack, especially considering the fact that it was so much good for Klal Yisrael. The RAMBAN said without them, the Jewish people wouldn't exist. Right? So he nevertheless says the following. He says, it could be that an additional element to their sin by taking the kingship, it's because they were Kohanim. They weren't your average Yisrael. When they were commanded, the Kohanim, there's a pasuk in Bamidbar, they should guard their Kohanim, their Kahanis, their priesthood. All the various things that the Kohanim had to do, it was a gift to them, this privilege of being a Kohen. They were not given permission to rule. They were given permission just to be the spiritual leaders of Klal Yisrael. The RAMBAN goes on, we don't have to do this inside, he quotes a Yerushalmi that seems to echo that idea. The RAMBAN's basic point is, what you have is the Kohanim, more accurately the Levim, they already had a job. Right? Unlike when somebody from another Shevet maybe usurps the crown, incorrectly, that's bad. It's particularly worthy of severe punishment when what they do is when the people that usurp the crown are people that were kohanim, that have their own job, their own responsibility among Klal Yisrael. To some extent, they're certainly the people that are doing the avodah in the Beis HaMikdash, but in many other ways, the entire Shevet of Levi is viewed as the educators and the spiritual leaders of the people. And so then they're particularly worthy of criticism when they go and try to take on additional responsibilities that will get in the way of what what their regular job is. There's a little bit of there's a kernel of an idea in this Ramban here that I think you could expand potentially. The concept it seems like Ramban is alluding to the fact that there should be. Are you smiling?
Checks and balances.
Checks and balances, but more than that, somewhat of a separation of church and state. I feel like
I think it's actually more. I don't think it's a separation of church and state. Actually,
I'm not saying that because every branch of government, so to speak, shouldn't be ruled by Kadosh Baruch Hu in the end, but that mixing the spiritual guidance and the politics is not really such a great idea.
But the idea that is uniquely considered to be American, the checks and balances of the executive and the parliamentary and the judicial, actually existed in the Torah. The executive was the monarchy.
There's a third branch that we didn't mention, by the way, a third branch of the government, so to speak.
The Sanhedrin.
The Sanhedrin.
There's actually a fourth branch.
What's the fourth?
There's the Sanhedrin.
Yeah.
There's the monarchy. Right. There's the priesthood, and there's the Navi.
The Navi, right. Okay.
All of which balance one against the other, in the system. When you decide to put together Malchus, right, and Kahuna, right, you are combining a tremendous amount of power in a very narrow area, and it does lead to corruption. And it did.
Leads to corruption in both, I think, a compromising in the ability to do both well.
Yeah.
I think that's that.
Well, the two aren't suited to one another.
Mm-hmm.
The use of raw power, which is the role of the monarchy, is very different than the role of Kahuna.
If you look in the Gemara, it mentions the direction these things took. That eventually, the Chashmonaim, the kings at least, went off the derech in many ways. That their taking of the Kahuna was their continuing to be the Kohanim Gedolim was inappropriate. Yeah. And there's a whole mess there. There's a lot of bad things that take place.
I mean, if you look at the nature of Yehuda, right? Yehuda is constantly having injected into it many different foreign elements, which in some ways make it a more powerful, raw power kind of tribe.
What do you mean by foreign elements? Oh, the various converts that came to be part of the Malchus.
Yeah, it's a very interesting thing that is the tribe that is subjected to a number of different things like that.
Are you saying the converts were automatically put into Yehuda?
No, that so much of the history of the Davidic line, you have Rus, you have Naama, you have a lot of non-Jewish blood coming in and influencing, I guess, so to speak, the genetics of the Davidic line.
There's a concept, and I wish I could give you the source off the top of my head. I can't off the top of my head. That is not a natural thing for Jews to dominate other Jews, to forcefully dominate other Jews. Right. So in order for Yehuda to fulfill its requirements, it had injections put into it of this raw power.
Interesting.
Right. That gave it the ability to do what it had to do, which is exactly what Shul couldn't do, by the way. It's his weakness was that he really wasn't good at ruling over.
Yeah.
He was too influenced by the people in some ways. David was prepared to be unpopular, if necessary, right, in order to do what he felt was right.
Absolutely. So I think I've heard people say a similar idea with regards to Moshe marrying Tzipora.
I hadn't heard that,
but a similar idea of. We'll end that idea there. But there is this idea of, I think, in addition to this balance of powers, if anybody ever tries to give you a very simplistic idea of perhaps how, let's say, the government in Israel should work today, so we should have a king, that's it, end of story. We have to realize it's a much more detailed, complicated system that the Jewish people are supposed to have. We have branches here. The king was, in many ways, had to answer to the Sanhedrin, to the Navi for sure. And what else do we have? We have this. We have the branch of Kahuna, which is a totally separate body. The educators, the spiritual leaders, the people was that itself was a job that shouldn't be mixed in with all the other stuff.
And my only point to that is that the purity of Shevet Levi, right, is almost the opposite in its nature from that of Yehuda, which is mixing, and Levi is
a certain purity.
Yeah,
that's a good point. Perhaps with educators, there's more of a need for that,
and
spiritual leadership,
and with those that are doing the avodah.
Sure. Unless you're going to say something. Okay.
The branches does Moshe represent? Not in the branch scheme.
So Moshe would be with a Navi, I would think. Right?
What?
He's asking what branch of government, so to speak, would Moshe be
well,
part of?
Well, in some ways, Moshe is the unique thing, is that some consider Moshe to be the first king.
He's also the first Kohen.
As well as being the first Kohen, as well as being a Navi.
There is something maybe Moshe being the first of everything.
And he was the Sanhedrin until he created judgeships.
Yeah, there's a Josh
so
in there somewhere.
It was all in him at the beginning, and then dispersed after.
I don't see that because Aaron became the Kohen.
After the 8th day.
Well, Moshe, if you look, he did the beginning of the building of the Mishkan and all of that. But there's two questions that I think we haven't really asked. RAMBAN doesn't tackle these at all. I've been taking for granted. I can imagine it's especially when we live in a democratic society, this concept that for sure the leadership has to come through David. Why is that? Why is that something important to us? And the second question is, why is it that it's so guaranteed? That when it does good, when we're living at a time where we're not being ruled by Malchus Beis David, which is, for example, right now, why is there Avtaka from Kadosh Baruch Hu that it's going to eventually return? Remember Achia, when he's speaking to Yeravam, he says, this is only temporary, know that. And we daven every day, we daven for Mashiach, Ben David, right? We specifically, making we want the Davidic line back. Why is it something that's so guaranteed, and why was David Zocha to have it in the first place?
They're not the same question.
They're not. They're very different.
Okay.
How do you get it in the first place, and then why is it there to stay? I think they can maybe be answered with in many ways just one idea, and it comes if you look carefully in the 6 parshas. I didn't put any of this on the source sheet, but if you look, a large portion of Yaakov's bracha to Yehuda praises essentially the obstacles that Yehuda had in life and his ability to bounce back from them. Not explicitly, like we said, everything is being said very poetically, but Chazal certainly note within the bracha that Yaakov gives Yehuda an appreciation for the fact that Yehuda somewhat messed up in the incident with Yosef, particularly more than the rest of the brothers. He was the ringleader of the sale, placing in the pit also as well. Yeah,
Reuben
the place in the pit, Yehuda the sale. And also certainly with the episode of Tamar, which is not in the interrupting the Yosef storyline by accident. It's something that's a significant part of history. And so we view Yehuda's bouncing back from these low points in his life as being something crucial to a leader, and that comes from that itself has, if we assume, is a nice way to end the Ramban's works on Bereshis, where he talks about so much of a theme that we've seen. It's of a Siman Labanim. It's in many ways given over in the genetics of the Jewish people, what previous generations have done. That Yehuda has certain abilities of tshuva and bouncing back from things that reflects a certain level of integrity.
And humility.
And humility, for sure. Right? Not only is it that a person is willing to admit his mistakes, which a king and a leader certainly should do. We could use a heavy dose of that in Klal Yisrael today. But more than that, even before mistakes are made, the ability to realize that I am fallible, that itself has a certain degree of humility that is very conducive, typically, to being a good leader. We have so many commandments. If you look, we mentioned this in passing, the Torah has so many details of how a king's behavior should be, and one of them is that he has to constantly carry a Torah around with him. He has to constantly keep in mind that as much power as he has, he's not the true king at the end, like what Shmuel said. God's your king at the end of the day. Somebody that has that mentality, that integrity, is somebody that could possibly fulfill that mission best, and that's why we daven for somebody from the Davidic line, somebody that has those midos, perhaps, and that's why Yehuda had it in the first place. Okay.
It's interesting when you look at the answer of Shimon Levi to Yaakov after the events of Shechem, and they don't respond by saying, "Oh, Dad, you're right." Hakazona Yeser, they're looking for an answer. They're looking for an excuse. They're looking outside themselves. They're not responding to their father who's saying to them, "But you didn't."
That's why they got Musar.
Directly, they got Musar, and they didn't accept it. And Yehuda,
Yeah, they don't think they're wrong.
they don't think they're wrong. That's the point. That they respond to their father as opposed to saying
I agree.
and conciliatory. Whereas Yehuda says, "I'm Milchier Benim," which is the real stepping up. Says, I'm responsible for everybody.
Mm-hmm.
You have the exception. It's a whole different, which is exactly like you're saying, but we have it even more clearly by, of course, Shimon Levi's Kahuna. They have a different line or a different approach towards responsibility, as it were, which is perhaps why the Kohanim were given such a higher midah of limitations in their lifestyle.
They need to be more restrained, perhaps.
They're more restrained. They're more.
You could,
perhaps again, you could make a drash.
We have another model of leadership, by the way, also within the Jewish people, particularly in the story. If you look at the Shvatim, who else is a very good candidate for leadership?
Yes.
Perhaps I would say Yosef. He's the one that supports the entire family. As great of a leader as he was, and his, I guess, flawlessness of character. No missteps at all. Okay, there's what to talk about there. But he didn't have a tamar in his life. Yeshiva Potiphar, he resisted, properly. He didn't have a life of scandal, Yosef. In many ways, we would view that as perhaps a maila, but in some ways, you could suggest that Yosef wouldn't know what to do if he did fall.
That's exactly
and
the problem.
that might be a reason why he wasn't the one to get the.
When somebody like
monarchy.
Yosef makes a mistake, he could crack.
Right.
When somebody like Yehuda makes a mistake, he bends, repents, and comes back. We see it with David.
So I say when the Malchus gets taken away from Yehuda, it's only temporary.
Yeah.
He'll bounce back. Whoever it is that's Yehuda's descendants have that in them to eventually make a comeback and eventually lead the Jewish people.